Welcome back.
Welcome back, family. I'm Renee,
I'm Curry.
and thank you for hearing us out.
hmm
And for our longtime subscribers, again, thank you for sticking with us and for hearing us out. And for our new listeners, we also want to thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you. And on our last episode, we read a excerpt from one
Mm-hmm.
of our favorite books, The Things They Carry,
By Tim
by
O'Brien.
Tim
Mm-hmm.
O'Brien. And really, the last episode was kind of establishing
Mm-hmm.
it's why it's not and why it shouldn't be a war. When I
Mm-hmm.
say it, I mean our our current predicament and
Right.
how we go about trying to solve it and how we go about trying to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
I in our discussion we talked about about courage and cowardice and
Embarrassment.
embarrassment
Mm-hmm.
and all these things and about how war is something of a gravity well. It kind of
Right.
just pulls you in,
Mm-hmm.
and it becomes not about these about moral justifications, not about actually trying to make things better or trying to be right.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes about trying not to be seen as a coward, trying not to
Mm-hmm.
be seen as a failure. It's less about the thing that you're fighting for and more about just fighting.
Right. And when you use, words like war,
hmm
you know, it isn't a simile or a metaphor. It is or it isn't.
hmm
Okay. And so in that case, it's not, our predicament. We want to say, well, it's like this, it's
hmm
like that. And when it comes to, war and its definition and its connotation, there isn't a like to it.
hmm
You're either fighting on the field, like fight, blood, whatever the case may be,
It's
or
either
you're
is
not.
like you said. It's either is or isn't.
Right.
So yeah, there isn't much of a gradient
Mm-hmm.
to
Right.
that. Not a lot of room for discussion in that
Mm-hmm.
particular point, and it's well, dreadful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's dreadful.
Yeah,
Just the
because
onset of it, just
right.
the idea
Yeah, of it.
of it.
Because again, like we've discussed many times, is that sometimes, we feel as if we're not, living up, or that we're not doing the things that we are supposed to be doing, or that we're failing in this case,
hmm
because we aren't acting as if, this is a war. And so
hmm
when you, fail to live up to what that means, the fighting and
Yeah,
whatever the case may be, and that whenever you're not doing that, then apparently, you're a coward and you're scary and
yeah,
all of this other stuff. And so we wanted to
yeah.
sort of
There are
move
many
that
things.
conversation.
There are many things that we think we could be doing.
Well, yeah.
Right?
Right.
Just from
Right.
our point of view, there are
Mm-hmm.
many things that we think could be doing better at, or that we should, make more of a concerted effort to
Right.
do and
Of
stuff like
course.
that. But trying to like fight a war,
Mm-hmm.
like trying to create battlements and fully integrate this warrior type mentality into
Mm-hmm.
us is not one of the things that I think we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't really the time for it.
Mm-hmm.
And my particular perspective is that there's never really a time for that. If
Mm-hmm.
you ever get to that point, then that means that you failed,
Mm-hmm.
that there's a failure on your part.
Mm-hmm.
you know and I do understand that sometimes you're going to have to meet the world on its terms,
Of course. Right.
and sometimes
Right.
you feel like you're going to have to
To.
fight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But never, like, war, that particular paradigm is always a personal failing.
Mm-hmm.
you know and they're always, well, what do you expect us to do? We're
Mm-hmm.
at this point. What do we do? What can we do? Is that you know the moment that you the moment that your words and your actions, and
Mm-hmm.
I think like things like diplomacy and stuff, like the moment that fails, right, then what can I say
Mm-hmm.
other than you have to make it work that particular way,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because it's not going to work any other way.
Right.
Like, war has never, like, as we've discussed many times before, it has never led to anything other than more war.
Mm-hmm.
It's never led to the thing that we needed to lead us to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're trying to get to that place of like of unity and brother, all that good stuff, and at least for us, just a place of agency.
Mm-hmm.
We all feel like we have some type of control. That's not what war
Mm-hmm.
is. War robs you of that agency. It
Right.
forces
Is
you
you
into a
right?
particular paradigm. That's what it always
Mm-hmm.
does. And if you breed that type of mentality, or you exist and try to create, a culture from that, you try
Mm-hmm.
to create a society from that, well, you get what you get.
Mm-hmm.
You get this. You get a world that is stunted and broken and feels like it is not meant for you. Like that,
Mm-hmm.
there's something wrong here. There's a wrongness, an awkwardness
Mm-hmm.
in our world that just does not allow for us to feel comfortable. And yes, that comes from oppression and systemic racism, but it also comes from our ideals in trying to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
It also comes because in trying to respond to that feeling of that dread, a
Right.
feeling of uncomfortableness, a feeling of oppression, and trying
Mm-hmm.
to respond to that,
Right.
it leads toward a particular mentality that ensures the thing that you're trying to fight, that
Mm-hmm.
ensures the thing that you're trying to stop. So war isn't the answer.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're dealing with, number
Mm-hmm.
one, and it's not how you solve it.
Right.
Then like we said before, well, if it's not war, if it's not this, then
Then
what
what
is
is
it?
it? Right.
And we talked about that before. We said that it's madness.
Mm-hmm.
It's this mania, this
Mm-hmm.
delusion that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to expound on that a bit more, we thought about reading another
Chapter
chapter
from Tim O'Brien.
from Tim O'Brien, from the Things They Carry.
Mm-hmm.
But we felt like if we were going to do that, then we need to just read the
So
entire
your
book.
book,
It needs to
right?
be a whole thing about
Right.
it. We don't want to pick up particular things.
Right.
And so if we're
But I
like,
felt like the chapter that we did,
yeah,
discuss
it was
that
very
it was
poignant,
poignant.
and it was
Mm-hmm.
very direct. And after that, it's like, what else do we need to read from it?
Right.
What else do we need to
Right.
say?
What else we need to say on this particular?
On this
Right.
particular point.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to do that, it's going to have to be the whole thing, and that's
Right.
going to kind of, we're trying to redefine.
Right.
So we decided on reading something else.
Right.
Reading if we're going to read another excerpt.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this one isn't really an excerpt.
Right.
It's more of a it's a letter.
Uh-huh.
We're going to decide to read something by James Baldwin.
Right.
And I've always liked James because I remember when we first read James Baldwin,
Mm-hmm.
and how he talked about America
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that.
Right.
And I remember being like, yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know about this whole,
this whole thing he's talking right. This whole thing.
that it's America and we got to do it here and all that stuff.
Right.
I was like, I don't know about that. But then after reading it, especially, like through the years,
Right. We read it. Yeah.
yeah, like just looking back and just seeing how I've grown just mentally to, and then I look back on it and be like, yeah, you know what? Actually, where I am now,
right,
I agree with
right, right.
That
right.
I just needed some time to marinate.
Well, and I think that's with all of us because our anger, and I feel like at times that we have a right to feel angry, and so with that anger, sometimes it. I also say that anger is an honest emotion too. I do say that as sometimes as well as that because I feel like you're acting in a way that that exposes truly how you feel at that particular moment. So I do understand the anger that James Baldwin felt at one time, and even I have moments when I'm like this is just not this is just not it. But then, allowing yourself to step back and to have that moment of clarity and just to realize realize the largesse of domination and racism and to realize, that you're not moving away, from anything. You're going towards something, and then you realize that a lot of the things that you're going to face here are the same things that you're going to face wherever you go because you take you wherever you go. And so that was the thing I think we just needed to work through, at least with James Baldwin.
And I would agree, like what you said, with that anger is an honest emotion. It is very honest, but it's not very constructive.
No, that's why I say at every point you
Mhm.
always have to take that step back.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's listen, it's a very honest
Uh
response
huh.
to the situation
Racial
that
that
we
yeah.
find ourselves in.
Mm-hmm.
You like I say, you have a right to
Right.
be angry, to be
Mm-hmm.
upset, to be sad, and all these
Mm-hmm.
things. But when you're trying to get out of it,
Right.
when
Right.
you're trying to
right.
rectify
Right.
stuff like that,
right.
it takes a different core,
Right.
a different place to pull from,
Mm-hmm. Correct.
and so we want to read. This letter. I think it's a letter to my nephew.
Mm-hmm.
This letter that James Baldwin wrote back in 1962,
Mm-hmm.
and
And I think a lot of our listeners, and new subscribers, they may be familiar
yeah,
with this particular
but
writing by James Baldwin.
but we want to read this here mainly because in trying to discuss madness, in trying
Mm-hmm.
to discuss delusion,
Right.
that thing that we're dealing with, which always seems so nebulous. Every single time we
Mm-hmm.
say it, every single time we try to define it,
Right.
it always holds on to that, to that nebulous,
Mm-hmm.
non-answer type
Right.
thing.
right.
But there's a few lines in here
mm-hmm.
in this particular writing
Mm-hmm.
letter from James Baldwin that I think better explains the
Right.
point that we're trying to make about madness than
But
we
doesn't
ever
he
could.
always?
So, would you like to read? Do you want me to
You
read?
can read it. You can read it. Yeah.
So, yeah, let's read this little chapter here.
Mm-hmm.
Or letter.
Well, letter.
So,
Mm-hmm.
here we go. Dear James, I have begun this letter 5 times and torn it up 5 times. I keep seeing your face, which is also the face of your father and my brother. I have known both of you all your lives, and have carried your daddy in my arms and on my shoulders, kissed him and spanked him, and watched him learn to walk. I don't know if you have known anybody from that far back, if you have loved anybody that long, first as an infant, then as a child, then as a man. You gain a strange perspective on time and human pain and effort. Other people cannot see what I see whenever I look into your father's face, for behind your father's face, as it is today, are all those other faces which were his. Let him laugh, and I see a cellar your father does not remember, and a house he does not remember. And I hear in his present laughter his laughter as a child. Let him curse, and I remember his falling down the cellar steps and howling, and I remember with pain his tears, which my hand or your grandmother's hand so easily wiped away. But no one's hand could wipe away those tears he sheds invisible today, which one hears in his laughter, and in his speech, and in his songs. I know what the world has done to my brother, and how narrowly he has survived it, and I know which is much worse. And this is the crime of which I accuse my country and my countrymen, and for which neither I nor time nor history will ever forgive them, that they have destroyed and are destroying hundreds of thousands of lives, and do not know it, and do not want to know it. One can be, indeed, one must strive to become, tough and philosophical concerning destruction and death, for this is what most of mankind has been best at since we have heard of war. Remember, I said most of mankind, but it is not permissible that the authors of devastation should also be innocent. It is the innocence which constitutes the crime. Mhm. Now, my dear namesake, these innocent and well meaning people, your countrymen, have caused you to be born under conditions not far removed from those described for us by Charles Dickens in the London of more than 100 years ago. I hear the chorus of the innocents screaming, "No, this is not true. How bitter you are!" But I am writing this letter to you to try to tell you something about how to handle them, for most of them do not yet really know that you exist. I know the conditions under which you were born, for I was there. Your countrymen were not there, and haven't made it yet. Your grandmother was also there, and no one has ever accused her of being bitter. I suggest that the innocent check with her. She isn't hard to find. Your countrymen do not know that she exists either, though she has been working for them all their lives. Let me stop right here real
mm-hmm.
quick.
Yeah.
And when we were going over this yesterday, we had
yeah.
something of a discussion about how James Baldwin is using
The word
the word
innocent.
innocent.
Right.
You know, there is a very facetious
mm-hmm.
tone
Yes.
to it when he is addressing his innocent countrymen, especially when he decides to talk about the predicament that a lot of us have faced and are facing.
Mm-hmm.
And how the innocent often say that we're being bitter and that it's
Right.
not fair the things that we're saying. You know, but to a people who have this culture of ignorance of blocking out all the things that don't serve their particular perspective and view on what the world is and how it's supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
then they can't they can't truly say they can't truly attest to
Mm-hmm.
bitterness.
Right.
They have a very skewed perspective on
Mm-hmm.
reality, so they don't know how it can what it does to people
Mm-hmm.
when your entire perspective is built on ignoring just that thing, just
Right.
that consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So when he says that this isn't bitterness
Mm-hmm.
that is coming out, this is reality, his
Mm-hmm.
reality, the
Right.
reality that he has to live with, that that his mother,
His grandmother. Mm-hmm.
his nephew's grandmother
Mm-hmm.
has to live with, and that he's trying to, describe to his, to his nephew. And but when he, at least from how I see it,
Mm-hmm.
is that innocence and how he's using here can also be you can also say naive.
Or ignorance.
Yeah, ignorant. But like I mean by naive in that naive, not being naive is not, I guess, how can I say this?
Yeah.
Naivety is
It's the stuff that you do when you're young and you don't know better. You know. Yeah. Basically, you don't know any better.
naive. It's like,
You're being
hmm,
naive. You don't know.
well, I'm trying to get it. Well, it's not that you don't know. It's that
You
it's is that
you
naivety is like it's like you have these unconscious blinders, right? To where it's not that you don't know.
you're
It's that
ignoring.
it's not that you don't know. Is that you're not aware of the things that you don't know.
Uh-huh.
And naivete comes from that dissonance in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. I'm trying to like, because all right, here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
I remember I was reading something.
Mm-hmm.
It was like some like science fiction type thing. I can't necessarily remember, but I do remember is that it shifted pronouns from he to she,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that it was describing a particular type of person, a particular type of class that I think I might have been reading something about Dungeons and Dragons or something, maybe, but it was describing some type of class
Mm-hmm.
that a person could be, and it shifted pronouns from he to she.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like going back and being like, did I miss something? Did
Mm-hmm.
I, because like why did it just shift this pronoun here?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that happening? And I was like, well, no, it just did.
Mm-hmm.
It just did that to show that it could be either a man or a girl,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember thinking like, well, when you say he, I just automatically assumed that you meant like everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like when you say mankind,
Right.
like you're not necessarily talking about man,
Right.
right? You mean mankind. But I remember being like, I guess like to a woman, that could be somewhat insulting.
Mm-hmm.
That when like this is how internalized I guess my misogyny is, and that when
Mm-hmm.
someone says he,
Right.
I automatically assume they mean everyone,
Right. Right. Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
That because for women they have to deal with these pronouns. They
Mm-hmm.
have to deal with it. They have to deal with this idea of of the standard being he.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what type of mentality, what type of thing that does to a person to to feel like that, to have to feel like you're existing in someone else's world
Mm-hmm.
to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not race. It's a whole different thing. It's a whole
Right.
different dichotomy.
Mm-hmm.
Something that supersedes it in a sense, because this idea of man and woman goes beyond black and white,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember thinking that for a woman, to have to exist in that, to have to be represented by the pronouns of he
Right.
and mankind,
Mm-hmm.
you must feel pretty regimented. It must be dehumanized. It must make you feel small,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I never realized that until this little moment.
Hmm.
This little moment of shifting the thing, because to me it was like, well, mankind, all that stuff,
Right.
that
That
just
includes that.
everybody,
Right. That includes
and I
everybody.
was
Right.
like, but there are some people who don't feel included
Hmm.
when those things, when the things are phrased that way. So
Hmm.
in deliberately saying he and she, and stuff like that, you're drawing that measure to include those people who aren't feeling like they're being included. But to me, at the moment, at that time, it didn't feel like a necessary step, because to me, they were already included.
Right.
But I was like, well, no, they weren't included. That's
Hmm.
like, see, because I was naive.
Hmm.
That was my blinders up,
Right.
because I just automatically assumed. So now, I always notice those points now,
Hmm.
to where, the where the dissonance of my particular,
Hmm.
perspective fails,
Hmm.
and automatically assuming these things. Now, it wasn't, let's say, it wasn't, that isn't necessarily malicious,
Hmm.
is the point I'm trying to make. It wasn't malicious, it wasn't intentional. It was just a byproduct of the reality that I was existing in,
Hmm.
of, of he and mankind always meaning just everyone.
Hmm.
And now, since that perspective is beginning to change and things are beginning to change, you know and when you read something that challenges that particular notion, you have to do that work,
Hmm.
right, to be able to accommodate for that. And that's what I mean by, naive.
Hmm.
For them and their reality that they're existing in, they have these, like I said, these unconscious blinders up
Hmm.
of what it is that we're existing in, to such an extent that when you describe your pain and your reality, it sounds like,
Bitterness.
bitterness.
Hmm.
It sounds like, you sound anachronistic to them, because to them that reality doesn't exist.
Hmm.
It's something that did exist but isn't, around anymore.
Right.
You know, and it's like, and to us that's insulting,
Hmm.
right? That's insulting, because no, we are existing in this present right now,
Hmm.
and
We're
this
not
pain.
exaggerating. We're
Yeah,
not
we're not
making up
exact. We're not.
anything.
This is what we're living with.
Right.
And we want people to, but I can understand the naivete,
Hmm.
because in your reality, when in your it's so far removed,
Hmm.
and that you're not even seeing that,
Hmm.
and you're not confronted with it on a daily basis.
Hmm.
You're not actually having to deal with it on a daily basis.
Hmm.
So when that moment comes, when you are confronted with it, it seems like, wait, what is this?
Hmm.
You have to take a double step, and not everybody, does the mental math to check themselves.
Hmm.
A lot of people didn't try to check reality. There's a
Hmm.
lot of people like today who are like, I don't need to use your particular pronoun. I don't
Hmm.
need to do that. It just, like stuff like that.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people who don't want to do that, who
Hmm.
don't want to have to, to self check and self regulate, to try, to best describe a world that fits all of us.
Hmm.
So I'm like, I see that here, and I see that reflected in this,
Hmm.
and when he says like innocent,
Innocent. Hmm.
there's a particular innocence, in a sense, that, like I said, that I'm not saying that you're not blameless,
Right.
that we're not placing blame, or that there isn't a consequence that is intentional,
Hmm.
from the way that you decide to live and the perspective that you have. But
Hmm.
there is an innocence, a
Hmm.
naivete
Hmm.
that comes with your particular worldview,
Hmm.
that anything outside of that seems vitriolic. It seems like we're trying to place blame. It seems
As
like
if we're bitter.
as if we're bitter, instead of just actually trying to describe our reality
Hmm.
and the things that we're feeling,
Or even trying to understand it.
and trying to understand
Understand
it.
it. Hmm.
You know. So yeah. So
Oh,
that's this is
all
the
right.
groundwork I want to. This is
Hmm.
like it's not necessarily like malicious.
Hmm.
It's just a dissonance,
Hmm.
right? So okay. Well, you were born. Here you came, something like 15 years ago, and though your father and mother and grandmother, looking about the streets to which they were carrying you, staring at the walls into which they brought you, had every reason to be heavy hearted, yet they were not, for here you were, Big James, named for me. You were a big baby. I was not. Here you were to be loved. To be loved, baby, hard, at once and forever, to strengthen you against the loveless world. Remember that. I know how black it looks today for you. It looked black that day, too. Yes, we were trembling. We have not stopped trembling yet. But if we had not loved each other, none of us would have survived. And now you must survive because we love you and for the sake of your children and your children's children. This innocent country set you down in a ghetto in which, in fact, it intended that you should perish. Let me spell out precisely what I mean by that, for the heart of the matter is here and the crux of my dispute with my country. You were born where you were born, and faced the future that you faced because you were black, and for no other reason. The limits to your ambition were thus expected to be settled. You were born into a society which spelled out with brutal clarity, and in as many ways as possible, that you were a worthless human being. You were not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity. Wherever you have turned, James, in your short time on this earth, you have been told where you could go and what you can do and how you could do it, where you could live and whom you could marry. I know your countrymen do not agree with me here, and I hear them saying you exaggerate. They do not know Harlem, and I do. So do you. Take no one's words for anything, including mine, but trust your experience. Know whence you came. If you know whence you came, there is really no limit to where you can go. The details and symbols of your life have been deliberately constructed to make you believe what white people say about you. Please try to remember that what they believe, as well as what they do and cause you to endure, does not testify to your inferiority, but to their inhumanity and fear. Please try to be clear, dear James, through the storm which rages about your youthful head today, about the reality which lies behind the words acceptance and integration. There is no reason for you to try to become like white men, and there is no basis whatever for their impertinent assumption that they must accept you. The really terrible thing, oh buddy, is that you must accept them, and I mean that very seriously. You must accept them, and accept them with love, for these innocent people have no other hope. They are in effect still trapped in a history which they do not understand, and until they understand it, they cannot be released from it. They have had to believe for many years, and for innumerable reasons, that black men are inferior to white men. Now, once again, I want to stop
Mm-hmm.
and discuss, because that's the ultimate point being made about like naivete and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And when we say madness, this is what we mean.
Right. Definitely.
This is what we mean.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to us that we get it right,
Mm-hmm.
that we clarify this, and we be as clear and precise and as accurate in our descriptions for in describing and talking about our world as we possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
because we cannot afford to be delusional.
Right.
You know, they're the white people. Well, they can't afford to be delusional either, but this entire world is constructed
Constructed
from
from
that
that
delusion.
delusion. Right.
We can't afford to have that. You know, and for white people, there's a lot of talk today about conspiracy theories and all this stuff, and
Oh,
how
yeah.
how that's taking over and all that stuff. And I'm like, white people have always been isolated from reality.
Mm-hmm.
Always. This world was constructed from that. Like I said, back in the day, it was phrenology. It was, oh, black people have an extra bump in their head. That means that they're inferior.
Mm-hmm.
It was the pseudoscience and all that other BS,
Mm-hmm.
right? But today it's QAnon and satanic pedophiles and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what it is. They've always been isolated from reality. They've always, because this type of mentality can only exist in a vacuum, can
Right.
only exist in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
They've always like the white flight. They've always run for the hills anytime their reality is challenged.
Right.
Anytime their preconceived notion of what the world is supposed to be is challenged. Of what we're black people are supposed to be. Like he said, you were only meant to be so much in
Mm-hmm.
their world, in their particular society they created, in their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Their perspective regimented you and relegated you
Mm-hmm.
to a very particular position
Mm-hmm.
that best serves them and what they believe themselves to be.
Right.
Anytime you expand outside of that, it is more than a challenge. It is. It
The
is.
insurrection on January the 6th.
It is.
That's
What can I say? It is. Well, he says it best right here. Many of them indeed know better. But
Mm-hmm.
as you will discover, people find it very difficult to act on what they know. To act is to be committed, and to be committed is to be in danger. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, the danger in the minds and hearts of most white Americans is the loss of their identity. Try to imagine how you would feel if you woke up one morning to find the sun shivering and all the stars aflame. You would be frightened because it is out of the order of nature. Any upheaval in the universe is terrifying because it so profoundly attacks one's sense of one's own reality. While the black man has functioned in the white man's world as a fixed star, as an immovable pillar, and as he moves out of his place, heaven and earth are shaken to their foundations.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, that's what you're dealing with.
that's what it's like to challenge,
Uh-huh.
to exist outside of their particular paradigm, to exist outside of their view of what you're supposed to be is like shaking heaven and earth. It's as if the sun goes out and all the stars in themselves wink out of existence one by one right in front of your face.
Mm-hmm.
You see your world dying. You see your constructed reality just falling apart. You start to see the seams.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're in a TV show, but you're starting to see the cameras. You're on a sitcom, right? And you don't know that you're on a TV show, right? But then one day you start to see the cameras, you start to see the mics, you start to see the lights, you start to see the audience,
Mm-hmm.
and that constructed reality that you exist in begins to fall apart as you find out that no, you're existing in something else,
Mm-hmm.
something that is radically different from this world that is always centered around you and yours,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what we're dealing with. That's the type of madness. That is what I mean by delusion. And that's why we, the ones who know,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the ones who know, that's why we cannot afford to be narrow.
Right.
This is why we can't afford to allow our perspective to constrict
Mm-hmm.
and to become so restrictive in what people can be
Mm-hmm.
and what we're trying to create. We can't allow that because once you do that, that's like the pilot to your sitcom. But
Mm-hmm.
soon enough, the curtains will be pulled back, and you'll be forced to confront the reality that you are really living in.
Mm-hmm.
But you will be wholly inequipped. You won't be ready. You won't be like I said. It'll be like what you will watch your world die, and you will stand by and die with it. You're going to try to force the world back into that narrow view
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only one you can possibly exist in. You won't move to exist with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to pull everyone back down. You're going to try your best. You're going to become a walking anachronism. You're going to be a person out of time, out of place, because the world has moved on without you. The world moves, but you have no agency, no control, no voice in what it is moving towards. You can only say what it was. And the only thing you can ever do is try to make the world what it
What it
was.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? It never was that.
That's right. That's the thing, right?
It never
right.
was that.
Right. Even your histories,
Mm-hmm.
you have, narrowed it to the point to where anything that exists outside of your definition of what that history is, then apparently that didn't happen, or
Mm-hmm.
it's a fluke, or it's conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it. And so we're constantly dealing with that, and that's what James Baldwin and so many others after him,
Mm-hmm.
since have been saying, is that this experience, this reality, is bigger than just your two eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of you just trying to just stay narrow, and then anything that falls outside that, when something is wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
That's why I say it's like what he says.
Mhm.
Don't believe anyone else's words on this. Don't
Right.
believe
Me,
my words
right.
on this.
Believe your
Believe your experience of it. And that's why it is so integral
Yeah, but you
that
can't,
we
and at the same
tailor
time,
our
you
experience. We
cannot
tailor
deny. Right.
tailor our
Mhm.
our experience of life, tailor our particular perspective
Mhm.
to account for the drift, the dissonance that a singular view can have.
Mhm.
Your particular experience of life is not the only experience
Mhm.
of life. Your particular culture is not the only culture.
Mhm.
Your God isn't the only God. You have to tailor that, not in opposition to
Right.
everything else, but with everything
Everything
else.
else.
Because everything else will exist. It will. It does.
Yeah, it does.
It is.
And it always has. Because
Mhm.
many of the conversations that we're having, particularly in like the social conversations about,
Mhm.
Gender and women's rights,
All
whatever,
that. Yeah.
all that stuff that you want to talk about. These conversations are old.
Mhm.
You can find ancient literature
Mhm.
from back in the boonies,
Way back.
way back, like we're going all the way back,
Mhm.
you know, where
BC back.
yeah, where they're talking about the same things that we're talking about today.
Mm-hmm.
The same social ills, same social problems. I don't know if they were called social ills back then,
Mm-hmm.
but in any case,
The same
it's
problems,
the
the same
same
wants, the
ones.
same loss of agency, the
Right.
same loss of control, the
Mm-hmm.
same madness.
Right.
It is pervasive.
Right. And while certain things may not have existed for you in
Mm-hmm.
your particular reality, it doesn't mean that it did not exist in others.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that is all of that is a part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And to deny that this particular thing is, well, that's what you have now.
Mm-hmm.
You have a denial. That's what this is. It's a denial of black people as human beings and human rights. And so that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
let's continue here.
Let's continue.
You don't be afraid. I said it was intended that you should perish in the ghetto, perish by never being allowed to go beyond and behind the white man's definition, by never being allowed to spell your proper name. You have, as many of us have, defeated this intention, and by a terrible law, a terrible paradox, those innocents who believe that your imprisonment made them safe are losing their grasp of reality. But these men are your brothers, your lost younger brothers. And if the word integration means anything, this is what it means: that we with love shall force our brothers to see themselves as they are, to cease fleeing from reality, and begin to change it. For this is your home, my friend. Do not be driven from it. Great men have done great things here and will again, and we can make America what America must become. It will be hard, James. But you come from sturdy peasant stock, men who picked cotton, dammed rivers, built railroads, and in the teeth of the most terrifying odds, achieved an unassailable and monumental dignity. You come from a long line of great poets, some of the greatest poets since Homer. One of them said, "The very time I thought I was lost, my dungeon shook and my chains fell off." You know and I know that this country is celebrating 100 years of freedom, 100 years too early. We cannot be free until they are free. God bless you, James, and Godspeed. Your uncle, James.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We're all trapped in this,
Mm-hmm.
and this delusion, this lie, this naive understanding has cost millions of lives.
Like you said, if
Right.
integration means anything,
Mm-hmm.
it falls down to
No, right.
those who know to make sure that everyone confronts reality.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't, to have to confront the reality of what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like what it exactly what it said, like this, that we with love shall force our brothers to see themselves as they are.
Mm-hmm.
And we've even talked about love before.
Right.
We've talked
Mm-hmm.
about all that stuff, and like I said, it always seemed like platitudes, and it always
Mm-hmm.
seems so impossible, and it always seems like a sacrifice. Like I
Mm-hmm.
have to love them and all
Right.
that stuff because
I don't
you're
love
mis-
them. That's
because you're
not
misconstruing.
true.
You're not
Right.
understanding.
Study. Right.
You know, you're not understanding what the, what we're saying, what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you what, our struggle isn't the white man. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the monolith. Our struggle is this madness. It is
Mm-hmm.
this dissonance. It is this delusion. It is as present in us as it is in them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but their reality is the one which dictates all the rest. But that does not mean that we don't have our own delusions
Mm-hmm.
of what it is that we're facing, of the people we're trying to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, like I said, you can just ask the question of women
Mm-hmm.
in the black community. This is a black women in the black community. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very frayed relationship
Mm-hmm.
because we're delusional, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're delusional. We aren't doing our work. We aren't doing the things we're supposed to do because we're still holding on. We're still, well, like I said, walking anachronisms.
Mm-hmm.
People out of place, out of time. The world is becoming what it always was.
Right.
It is changing. It is moving.
Mm-hmm.
It is forcing us to confront the reality of the human existence, not this constructed one
Right.
that we've created for ourselves, but what actually is.
Mm-hmm.
in congruence with everything else.
Right. And how is it that we answer what is what it is that we have to confront in the things that we're confronting today? The answers that we need today are, it's not that they're not the same answers that
Mhm.
we didn't need before, but the way that we apply these answers, the way that we do things today. We just have to answer the call now.
Hmm.
We can't answer the call 400 years ago or
Hmm.
200, whatever. But we can definitely
That
answer
day is
that
come and
call.
gone.
Yeah, that day has come. But we can answer it today. We could do what we need to do today.
Hmm.
And what's crazy is that every we pretty much know what needs to be done.
Hmm.
That's the thing. Are you brave enough, courageous enough, or I don't know, cowardly or whatever the case may be, enough to do
Whichever,
it?
whichever,
Whichever,
whichever
how do you want to phrase
word,
it? Right, right.
verb,
Yeah,
anything,
adjective, whatever.
adjective that
Right,
gets you to do that thing that you know ought to
to
be
be
done.
done. Hmm.
You
And
know.
are you brave
So
enough
yeah.
to do it?
So in conclusion,
Hmm.
this one doesn't need to be too long.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. In conclusion,
Hmm.
this madness that we're talking about, like I said, it is cognitive
Hmm.
dissonance. It is, naivety. It
Hmm.
is denial
Hmm.
of reality. Of our reality, a denial of your
Hmm.
experience, and a denial of their experience, a denial of the most basic, fundamental understandings of what a person is supposed to be,
Hmm.
and what our society is supposed to do for those persons.
Hmm. And if
Everything. Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
about to say, and if our society is not doing the things that it needs to do for its people, then there's a failure. There's
Hmm.
something wrong with that,
Yeah.
and we need to answer that call. We're here,
It
so it needs
has
to
a
be answered.
cascading effect. It
Hmm.
it falls back on itself. You see it in the biggest, most magnanimous of things, in the smallest of interactions.
Hmm.
This dissonance, it is everywhere. You know, and that's what we need to address.
Hmm.
That's what we need to face. And how do we face that? Like we've already said, like he said,
Right.
you face it by forcing those who don't know to confront, those things that they are denying.
Right. If you love your people, you don't allow them to to live in that kind of ignorance,
Hmm.
that kind of you know that kind of ignorance, that kind of
Hmm.
naivete.
Yeah.
You know, and we have said for I don't know how long, that truth is on our side, that we're right. You know,
Hmm.
so if we are, then we bring that truth. You bring that to the forefront at all times.
Yeah.
And so, and we know what that means.
Hmm.
We know that in bringing that truth, you know, that you are going to be, you're going to be met with obstacles.
Hmm.
You know, you're going to face, things that are dreadful. But it doesn't mean that you don't bring the truth,
Yeah.
because that's because the truth it opens up, and so that's what
Hmm.
we need to do.
So yeah, and yeah, when we say, and just the idea once again
Hmm.
of force,
Hmm.
and so you have to force them.
Right.
Like how does that not entail confrontation?
Temptation. Right.
That build a reality,
Uh-huh.
inoculate yourself
Uh-huh.
to where, like I said, the poison cannot reach you. But the snake in and of itself, the snake has to change to exist in your world
Hmm.
because you've refuted it.
Hmm.
You've refuted his perspective, its ideal of what
Hmm.
you're supposed to be. That's what we mean by force.
Yeah.
That's what evolution is.
Right.
Just it was millions upon millions of years where we were in the ocean,
Hmm.
right? We felt no need to go on land. There was no food on land. We need to go up there, right? But through time,
Right.
it started to get up there,
Hmm. So that's
right?
where we're
And
going.
competition in the ocean
Right.
start to get so bad. You saw that grass up there,
Right.
and you're like, we need to get
Get
up
up
there.
there. Right.
And through millions upon millions of years of
Hmm.
trying to get up there, you finally did.
Hmm.
You finally did,
Hmm.
right? You left the ocean. That's the type of force I'm talking about,
Right.
right?
Right.
This is a battle of attrition,
Right. It is
of
definitely.
who is going to stand,
Hmm.
who will last, whose perspective will last.
Hmm.
And like we say, I forget what I think it might just be a proverb, but like that lies are quick but truth has endurance,
Yeah,
something like
lie
that.
has speed, truth
Like
has
yeah,
endurance. Right.
the truth lasts.
Mm-hmm.
It will always last.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you operate in it, you will always last with it.
Yep.
You don't need to force them to change at gunpoint and
Right.
stuff like that.
Right.
That's not what this is
Right.
because that's not change at all.
Right.
You know?
And we know how well that has worked.
Yeah.
Here we are
What we
still
need to say,
doing
yeah,
it.
we're still here.
We're
You
still
know,
here, you know.
we're still living in the impression of here we is. So
Yeah.
like, so yeah, when we so the thing you're constructing a reality,
Mm-hmm.
you're creating something that best works for you and the people around you that allows you to succeed with the ideals that you say are integral to your being,
Mm-hmm.
right? We create that. We live in that. We exist in it. If they come, when they come with their poison, we exist in our truth. You know, when they come with their swords and their guns, we persist in our truth.
Mm-hmm.
We do what we must. We do the thing that we know is right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't allow anything to take you away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me,
You'll last long. You'll
you
be
will
here.
last.
Yeah.
And the snake, in and of us, the snake will change.
Mm-hmm.
The snake will change to exist in your world, right? And at that point, it won't be a predator. It won't even be a snake anymore.
Right.
It's going to be
What
something
else?
else,
Right.
something that works in your world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we mean.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments. And once again, thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you so much.